one, am appreciative of that fluidity of the situation, and we have to get to work with some plan or another and just work with all the wrinkles that come along the way. But it's daunting to try to reopen schools in this current environment, as we are seeing by the plethora of plans that districts are coming up with all around the state and the nation. And everybody's trying to do a wrinkle, and you have the president of the country saying schools will open 100% full time. And so you have extremes on each end of the spectrum, people who refuse to send their kids because they are, for good reason, afraid that their children might become infected and then pass it on to their home situations. And so it's really, really complicated. And so we heard a lot of pros and cons about lots of possibilities, but rather than go into any more detail, I think we should just save the time for a presentation that will come later in the meeting about the actual plan that is the plan, at least for today. Jess, want to add anything?
I think you covered it, Mike.
Any questions? I mean, I think we're going to have lots of questions later, but for now, I'm not really inviting questions unless people have some burning issue to get at.
I'm good.
That was it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Next is finance. Carrie?
Yeah, so finance, our first item of business was reviewing the bills, which we do every month, and we approved those already this evening, so you're good there. Second item was a referendum finance update, and the message was that the referendum is on budget. We have a very small amount of contingency left, but we do have some contingency left, so it's on budget and actually a smidge ahead of schedule, so that's good news. We discussed the short-term borrowing possibilities, and I know Lois is on, so if anybody needs some clarity on this, she can help explain, but there's a possibility that our tax revenue payments may be late, which could impact our tax flow. So Lois is just preparing for short-term borrowing if that ends up being a need we have. So we won't know, obviously, until a little bit later in the year, but we just want to be prepared for that in case it happens. Anybody have any questions about that specifically?
I would have a question. And why would the tax payments be delayed? Is it just because of the situation?
Because the municipalities have actually granted extensions for people to make their payments.
Okay.
And so because they don't necessarily have to pay their taxes on time, that revenue then in turn will come to us later, okay, potentially.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on that? The fourth item on our agenda was the financial implications of COVID. So basically what we learned in that conversation was that we may need to adjust the budget in terms of where dollars go, not necessarily the dollars, but where dollars go. Is that accurate, Paul? Just a little shuffling of where we need to allocate. Things like transportation, cleaning supplies, those types of things could be impacted, and we may need to shuffle some money. So just another be prepared item on that. And then the last item we discussed was the Fund 46. So normally at the end of the fiscal, we allocate any remaining balances to potentially to Fund 46, which is the maintenance fund. We didn't know when we met last week exactly what there was left for funding, so we weren't sure if there was money that would be allocated or if that was where it would be allocated to. So I don't know if we have any updates on that, Lois, since Thursday.
We
You muted yourself again.
Yep.
How's that?
There you go.
All right. since Thursday, I was able to put together some better numbers for us on how the year ended. And if you'll recall, at the beginning of the year, we had committed 1.5 million of our fund balance to the project. And so we really anticipated to use all of that for our fund balance and take our fund balance down to a lower level. With the numbers that I put together today, we actually reduced our fund balance by 1.1 million. So we have 365,000 that we had committed to the project, thinking we would use that. We did spend all of the 1.5 on the project. So I'm assuming, maintenance projects, transportation, those kinds of things, substitute costs came in less with the happening since March. So we were able to retain 365,000 of that. And in discussing it with Paul, we're kind of thinking with the unknowns this year and the potential cash flow borrowing that we would keep that money in our fund balance versus putting it into Fund 46. And that's our feeling on it.
Yeah.
I guess that would be up to your discussion.
And is that what's on the agenda for approval, Paul? Is leaving that, putting that money in fund balance?
What's on the agenda tonight is Fund 46.
Fund 46 transfer.
Fund 46 transfer, but we could always do that again. If we're going to do a Fund 46 transfer, we have to do it by the end of the month.
Okay.
Right. Lois, would we need to make that transfer? We wouldn't need to do anything with the fund balance, correct? We could do that in August if need be.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
They can't hear you really well over there.
Lois, could we do that transfer? If we're going to keep it in fund balance, do we have to have a motion to do that? And would that need to be next month?
We would have to make the transfer to Fund 46 by July 31st, and that would be a board action.
Okay. So we would probably need to have a separate meeting here if we can't get it through tonight on the agenda.
Right. Okay.
Are you proposing we keep it in the fund balance and not transfer it?
Yeah.
So we're just going to table 5.7.
We'll table 5.7 until later in the month. We'll have that.
Okay. All right. Okay. Is there anything else, Carrie?
Nope, that was everything for finance.
Okay. Next is building and grounds. Carrie, you covering that?
I have that too. Yeah, so on our building and grounds agenda, we discussed the maintenance director's report, and the maintenance department has been incredibly busy keeping the grounds up and preparing for fall, and also keeping the facilities clean. So some of the highlights of what they've had going on, Donald reported that they've done about 80% of the RES move. So much of the furnishings and supplies that are there that are going to be moved into a building on campus, that work has been done. The existing gym at the high school, the floor work has been completed. So that floor was stripped, repaired, and then redone. We did not do the bleacher work there yet, but we did do the floor work. The restroom project at DES, there's one set of bathrooms to complete, so that is nearing the end. That was a little stalled due to some urinal replacement, so that took them a little longer than they anticipated. The RES removal, have the portables been completely removed now, Paul, or is there still a little lingering work there?
I'd have to look at it, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Donald had reported that it was hopefully going to be done by the end of last week.
It was cleared off when I went through on Saturday.
Yep, so that project should be completed. They are also working on splitting a classroom at the middle school that'll be used for district storage as well as some maintenance storage. And then we had some discussion about deep cleaning and making sure that they have the products that they need And Donald feels pretty confident that they do, that they've got the right products, that they've got access to, for the most part, everything that they need. And they're putting them to good use. So the only other item on the building and grounds agenda was the facility usage after June 30th as well. Joey did report that about 15 to 25 students a day have been using between the weight facility and the gym facility. They feel like it's going pretty smoothly. The supervisors on site are making sure to wipe everything down as kids come and go, and they're doing a check-in process, so they feel pretty confident that that's going well. Unless Joey's online to report something different, I think so far so good there. And that was building and grounds. Does anybody have any questions?
You mentioned the bleachers, what's being done?
The bleachers in the existing gym, there's several broken boards. And so the intent is to have those boards repaired or replaced so that those bleachers are not cracked and broken. So.
All right. Any other questions for Carrie? All right. Hearing none, before we go into action items, back up in acknowledgments and public comments, we probably should have welcomed our new administrator, Paul Weber. You see him there on our grid. Paul started with us. We hired him back in March, and he's been with us probably for the last 2 to 3 months, sitting in on meetings with the admin staff, chatting with people. So we've had a really nice rollover from Jeff into Paul. And so I think he's really had a good introduction to Dodgeville. He's slowly meeting everybody. He promises to get out and make sure to make the acquaintance of everybody as we slowly roll into school year. But so far we've had a really good time bringing him up to speed, and he's been absorbing a lot of information in the last month. So it's been a pleasure working with him so far, and we really look forward to working with him over the next couple of years, or longer. We'll see how long it goes.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And so take it easy on me if I butcher the board meeting here for the next first few times, because I'm still learning that process. But I want to just thank everybody. It's been a very warm welcome. I just feel very comfortable coming into the district. Everybody has been extremely helpful and extremely kind. And so I just appreciate that. And I just really look forward to working with the staff and the students and moving the district forward. So, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So we're going to go into action items, and we're going to hit it hard right away with 5.1, which is approval of general relaunch plan for the 2020-2021 school year. Paul, are you covering this?
Yep, I'll take over from there. And I'm going to have Jackie's helping me out tonight. She's going to put up the the slide deck for us. And she's going to man that while I have a few notes over here.
Oh, you know.
So, first of all, I want to thank the task force that was put together. We had 9 different subcommittees that worked very hard at the topic that they were assigned. All of the administrators took on the role as subcommittee heads, along with some other district personnel. And so it was a really good process. And the discussion that came out of there, I really believe, regardless of what comes out of this with COVID, is going to set us up well when we have a discussion about rewriting the strategic plan moving forward, because a lot of those topics were topics of discussion. And so I think it was a sort of a good precursor to that process as well. Just a couple words before I get into the presentation, just to kind of set the stage. That, why superintendent once told me that there's seldom an issue so thin that there are not two sides to consider. The COVID pandemic and the issue between the health and safety of students and staff versus the need for students to resume in-person instruction and participate in extracurricular activities epitomizes the meaning of this statement. The task force spent the last month actively listening, researching, and discussing the topic. It has taken into consideration all aspects related to safety in opening schools. The members patiently and methodically waded through information, They held meaningful conversations and grappled with unknown variables. Most importantly, they resisted the temptation to race out in front in search of a solution. They trusted the process. The plan being presented tonight is a beginning, not an end. It is an anchor point that will allow the administration and staff to begin designing specific processes and policies that best fit their students and buildings. The administration and I are confident that this plan will work. We also are fully aware that the sands where we are standing may shift tomorrow. There is an old saying from the civil rights movement that at times you must pray and move your feet. We are at that moment. The task force has completed the work. I am asking the board this evening or in the near future to allow us to take the next step by considering the task force recommendation for approval. So with that in mind, I will move into the first slide. I think it's important that we talk about the idea that we were really looking at the 30,000 foot level and we were focusing on certain priorities. These priorities have driven the work throughout, and they include maintaining the health and safety of students and staff, providing a pathway for students to return to school, and giving options to parents. As we put the plan together, we took into consideration several different elements, including data from the community. We sent out a community survey back in June. We had very good responses between students, staff, and parents. Over 500 people responded, might even been 600 people responded to the survey. One of the things, there are a couple points that stood out, that 67% of the parents want their children back in school, with another 20% neutral on the topic. So the idea that either way, if we open the school, they'll probably send their kids back. 60% of the people feel social distancing at school is very important. And 13.5% feel the need to keep their child at home. We respect all of these decisions that parents and opinions that parents have. We also took into consideration input from the subcommittee. Some of the things that came out of the discussion: for elementary students, in-person instruction is highly desired. That there was a large number of middle school students who did not engage well in virtual learning. And that the staff is worried about their own health and safety, and that PPE and social distancing is important to them. These were other factors that were taken into consideration. So we wanted to make sure we got input from the staff and the community, and we had the discussions in a meaningful way as we went forward with the framework. The plan itself, as we call it, represents the information from 9 subcommittees. And you had an opportunity to read through that. And it's a lot of information. But we identified a while back that there is really one question that has to be answered before we can start narrowing this process down from the 30,000 foot view to the 10,000 foot view to the 5,000 foot view and then to the ground. And that is, what are the options parents will have when school starts? Because we need to survey parents again to determine what they would choose for an option so we can begin planning appropriately. And we want to take into consideration that some people want their child back in school and some people want them at home. And so we worked hard to develop a plan that could meet the demands of all. I also caution, though, that as we sought that plan, and we like to call that we were seeking a plan for the common good, that not everybody may be satisfied with the choices that we give. And we're asking people to understand that we're trying to please the greatest amount of people, and that it's important that everybody maybe gives up a little bit of what might be in their self-interest for the good of the many. And so with that, I am going to have Jackie click on the relaunch plan, which is linked there. And I just want to go over briefly, and then I have a few bullet points to explain about it. First of all, we would look at dividing students into two groups. ELP through 9th grade and 10th through 12th grades. We just, during our discussions and gathering the information from parents and from staff through the subcommittee process, we really believed that the most vulnerable population during emergency remote learning last spring were the ELP through 8th grade. We added the 9th grade because we feel that's such an important transition, and not to have those students in making connections with the high school teachers could be detrimental when we do come back to the brick and mortar. And so in that model, the format and schedule would be brick and mortar. The students would attend school each and every day. So the instruction would be in person. To do this, we would also need to take into consideration the importance, as the community said, and the staff has said, the idea of safety and how could we effectively social distance. Our initial numbers based on square footage in buildings and the recommendations from the CDC and Iowa County on social distancing, we feel at this time that we could, by dividing the students up, make this happen. In this instance, we would have ELP through 3rd grade at DES, 4th through 6th grade at the middle school, and 7th through 9th grades at the high school in full day scenario. The 10th through 12th grade students, we would treat a little bit differently, but we feel that the process that we're developing for the 10th through 12th graders could not only be a short-term solution for COVID, but could truly be a model that could set Dodgeville aside post-COVID. And that is the idea that we would run more of a blended format / schedule with instruction being asynchronous, which means that it could occur when the student wanted to learn. So the information is available, they could access it, very much like the remote learning that we were doing in the spring. Oftentimes that was the mode. We would also look at synchronous learning, in which the students would be online. They could be at home, they could be someplace else, they could be somewhere else in the building for that matter. And the teacher would be teaching live, so in real time to them and in person. We do feel it's important to get our high school students back into the building. It may not be full time. For some it may be, but for others it may not be. It's going to be a flexible model. So for example, it may be that our science teachers decide that they're going to run labs several times a week, and students would come in for their labs. It could mean that there's going to be a discussion session for a literature class, and they're going to hold it here at school through social distancing in one of our large rooms. Mr. Bonsack and I have kicked around the idea, and I'll give him the credit, it was his idea to have areas in the building that would almost be like a student union area where kids could go and study. They could get access help from staff. They could have study groups. And so we feel there's some value to that. It would also provide flexibility in the fact that students could continue to work at maybe different hours that they normally would. So a student may have some classes in the morning, but maybe they don't have a class in the afternoon on a certain day. And so they would have time available maybe to go to work or do other things. And so we really feel that this would benefit all students when they leave Dodgeville High School and they go out into the post-secondary world, that they would have some of these time management skills, that they would have been set up in a system that many of the universities and technical colleges are now using and probably will continue to use. And so we see some value in that. An important point in all of this is that all parents have a choice to keep their child at home. And we're not going to forget about those parents and those children. We are going to use asynchronous and synchronous opportunities for students to participate and follow along at the same pace in the curriculum as all other students. I think one of the real benefits of running a system like this is that it's going to put more importance on having a guaranteed and viable curriculum. So we have teachers teaching at the same time, the same topic at each grade level. And so a student who might be at home is going to be at the same pace and in the same area as the students who are taking it in the classroom. And that's a very important point and an element that we have to make sure we get right. So we want to make sure that parents have that choice and they're going to be supported. So much so that we appointed Brian Braun to be our director, or our connection for parents in remote learning. Okay? And Brian's going to be there to reach out to parents, to follow up, to answer questions, and to be the liaison to the staff members. So he's going to help organize this. I think it's important that we have that single point of contact for the district where people know they can go to get an answer, so that they know help is available. Because I know that was one of throughout the state and throughout the country, I'm sure, one of the biggest complaints is that people just felt as parents somewhat helpless. They didn't know where to go. If they had a technology question, or if they had, whatever it might be. And lastly, on a limited basis, but we don't want to forget about this, if there's a parent who says, listen, I really just want to educate my child at home, and I really want to do the educating, okay? We have some options for them as well through, we have a number of virtual schools that we could connect with, that they could get curriculum from, and that we could assist them with, but they would do the teaching, and they would have a teacher from that organization assigned to the child. But once again, we want to have that as an option. So you can see the little chart there. It kind of goes through physical distancing. We feel a majority of the time, there's always a risk sending your child to school. And I think that's an important point that we need to make. Right? There's no guarantee that someone is going to get sick if they come to school, whether it be with COVID or the flu or whatever it might be. Right? And we will do our absolute best to social distance. Right? There may be times where it's not perfect, but the social distancing guidelines are there for a reason. And we're going to try to meet those guidelines. But we also know that there might be a time where, for a short period of time, kids may not be as social distance as we'd like them to be. For physical distancing for the older grades, we believe we can do that with the number of kids that might be out of the building at the time versus the number of kids in the building at that time. We feel we have a very good shot at making that work. We're not going to forget about kids' social and emotional learning needs. We know that this has been hard on students, and there are a lot of students out there with mental health needs that have not been able to make connections because of COVID. And so I know Mr. Smoody has been working very hard at making sure with his staff that we are going to have services available both virtually and in the building. And that's going to be at varied times as well. School counseling, the same thing. School counseling, we really want to have that focus, especially at the 10-12 of school to work, of getting out there, and how can we make this an opportunity for students to personalize their education and make connections out into the world, so that when they leave here, they're stepping into that the opportunities that they're looking for. Instruction during the day for ELP and through 9th, and flexible for 10th through 12th. Special education, the same. Food service will be at school for the ELP through 9th grade. So those kids, which is important, they're going to get a meal every day. We could also set up delivery and at-school meals for our 10th through 12th grade students, so that they also have an opportunity to eat each day. And then extracurricular activities. Right now, we have those scheduled after school for ELP in 9th grade, and we feel they can maybe be somewhat flexible for our older kids, depending on how the schedule works out. You know, maybe some clubs or organizations could actually meet during the school day if it works out that way. And transportation, we would have before and after, and we even have evening in case somebody would want to run a lab. Maybe we can work it out that we can have an evening bus run some nights so that students could get transportation if necessary. But maybe a better word to put there is it's going to be flexible. So that kind of describes the plan. I kind of summarize it in words at the bottom as well, so you could read it there. At this time, I'm going to have Ms. Getzky go back to the PowerPoint. And here are some of to sum up some of the points that I think are very important. The first thing I want to say is that the administrative team, after gathering all the information and putting it together from the task force, literally sat around a classroom for 2 to 3 hours one morning and just really kicked this plan around. And we thought we kind of scoured it up in town looking for what works well and what doesn't work well. The one thing that we understand, and I hope everybody else understands, and I mentioned it in the introduction, is this is a beginning. Already, Mr. Bonsack has come to me with some wonderful ideas that have been ruminating through his head on how we could make this even better or change things. So this is going to be an ongoing process. So if I don't want anyone to leave here tonight thinking, well, this is the only way it's going to be. We have to start somewhere. And we believe this is a good starting point. So that in mind, here's what we like. We like that it's daily in-person instruction for grades ELP through 9. We like that we can social distance. We like that there's real-time and own-time opportunities for learning for parents who opt to have their child learning from home. We like that we have fully virtual options for parents who would like to teach their own children on their own time. We like that it's real-time, own-time, and in-person opportunities for students in grades 10, 12. We like flexible, personalized learning environment for grades 10 through 12. We feel that there could be some relief for an anticipated shortage. And we like that we can begin to work on a guaranteed and viable curriculum. Here are some of the threats that exist. I would also like to point out that I think some of these threats would be with any system that we put in. And I think you could see that. There might be some that maybe are more of a threat to an in-person type system, okay, or an out. So we kind of have both of those. So there might be double the amount of threats depending on us having both systems. But there's always a consistent monitoring of health for learners and staff. We understand that virtual learning is only a couple sick children or sick staff members away. Ability of families to respond to health issues with their children is always an issue if they have to be quarantined. Preparing for potential closure, making sure we have those policies and procedures in place is a threat because you always don't know. If you haven't done it before, sometimes you scramble a little bit. So we want to make sure those are solid. Ability for staff for quasi-physical distancing. We want to make sure that our staff is safe. We've already been able to secure a bunch of masks and personal face shields for all of our staff members. So we feel good about that. But we want to make sure that social distancing, whenever possible, is available as well. We want to ensure the safety for learners and staff. We want devices to deliver instruction asynchronously. So we want to make sure that that works for all students. Food service options could be a threat. We talked about what happens if a couple of our employees in food service get ill. And the importance of maybe them not intermixing between schools because we have to make sure we have a backup plan if that would happen. Cost of transportation due to increased routes. I think that's going to be maybe a given. We're going to have to look at that to make this work. And I think a threat is that we could have a loss of families to other districts if we go virtual only. And so that puts us in a spot where, that health and safety again, do you bring students back or do you keep them virtual based on that? And so at this time, I have all of the administrative staff on. So I'm glad they're here because I think for some of them, these questions will be more related to their subcommittee. So I will ask them to answer the questions. I will do my best in the areas that I've been involved with to ask. But and that's one point I want to say. This was truly a shared process. I give so much credit to our administrative team for the way they handled this process. And starting the new job, there were times where I was still working for the Wausau district, so I could even sit in on subcommittee meetings. They ran them, and they did a great job. So that's why I need to defer, because I don't know everything about what they talked about, but I trust them in the recommendations. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
So I just have a couple things here I wrote down while you were speaking, Paul. Do the DHS teachers cover the 7, 8, and 9 students then that come over from the middle school?
I'm gonna let Ryan respond to that since he's been dealing with staffing in his building. So Ryan, go ahead.
So in looking at the 7, 8, 9 staff, we would be looking at moving staff. So the 7th and 8th grade staff would be coming to the high school. The 9th grade staff, we do have a team of 9th grade teachers that currently teach primarily 9th grade courses. However, there are times when they also teach an AP course or so. And so we would be having to work with the allied teachers so that they could work with those students during that time, so that the teachers could still teach the fields and the courses that they've been experts in.
Okay. Will students be required to log into classes at a particular time? It won't be like the teachers on a call for 4 hours and they just wander in whenever?
That's a great question, Mike. And I think in our plan, and I've said the principals work this out with their staff, but there was very much during our subcommittee, I was on learning and technology, and the staff was very adamant that we tighten that area up. And so I think there needs to be, and this is no longer emergency remote learning, right? This is school. And so especially in synchronous learning, when the teacher says, we're having a class and you can come in via your computer, but I am going to be teaching live and you need to be there. And so we need to start taking attendance, and we will need to hold students accountable, just like we would in a regular situation for compulsory attendance if they're not attending those classes. Exactly.
Okay. Is the county going to clarify whether we need to be at 6 foot, 3 foot distances, and will everybody be in masks when they're in the school?
Sure. I'll answer the mask question, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Smoody. Maybe he has some more information on that because he was working a little bit more on that than I was. But we've had a long discussion on masks, and what we've agreed upon right now, but it could change, is that there will be areas in the buildings that will be masked zones where we don't feel like we can have, or we could break our social distancing potentially. And so we want students and staff masked. There will be other areas where we can social distance, and then students can have their masks off. I know one of the fears is that students are going to have to wear a mask all day long, and that is not the intention at all. We understand that would be an uncomfortable thing, that it'd be difficult to learn wearing a mask all day long, and so we would not make that part of our policy. We want to do it reasonably, and we want kids to wear masks and staff to wear masks when they should be wearing a mask. When they don't have to wear one, they can have it off.
I assume that with that policy that if parents want their child to wear a mask.
Absolutely. That will trump it. No one says that you can't wear a mask, right? They can wear a mask all day long if they would like to wear a mask.
Bob, do you have anything else to add to that?
Bob, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, you're looking at your social distancing being 6 foot as a barrier, unless there's an impermeable barrier such as plexiglass or anything like that. That's likely not going to get smaller when we look at anything else. Basically, it stayed 6 foot away, and that's what we've been figuring our social distancing numbers on.
Address that.
Questions. So we have a couple of questions online also, Paul. First one is from Gretchen Bruger. She's our student representative to the school board. Let me get to the top of where she is here. She said her computer's unstable, so she's unable to present to us tonight. She said students appreciate the opportunity to use the weight room and the gym right now when we can get the 10 and 10 in. Students are curious about what will happen with music classes. We already answered about wearing masks. And how will blended learning for the older kids affect transportation?
Good question.
That was a great question or questions. And I'll start with the first one. Music class is still something we're trying to work out. I was just talking to Mark today, and he had mentioned that they're waiting on a report from, I believe, the University of Colorado, maybe. And that is supposed to be maybe the definitive report on some of the safeguards and precautions for music. And so we're definitely going to rely on that. One of the things that I think is important is we have to find ways for kids to make meaningful music. And whether that's a small group, that may be how it works if we can't get them in large groups. That's going to be one of the unfortunate things about COVID, is that's going to be a difficult space to overcome. But we are committed to finding ways for kids to make music together in some way, shape, or form that's meaningful. And then the other question was on older kids and transportation. We will have transportation for students. If they would have to take a class and it doesn't start till 10 o'clock, they could still hop the bus and come in the morning. And we talked about that concept of having a commons area for students who might have poor internet access, that they could come in and work during the day, or students who have transportation problems could take the bus in and be here during the day.
And then one last thing from Gretchen. Are we planning on starting school at the normal time?
Right now, yes.
There's another question we have here. Will academic counselors be available to work with families to support the best student approach for 10th through 12th grade?
I'm going to I'll defer to Mr. Smoody since he worked with the counselors.
Okay.
Hey, can because we're having trouble hearing some of the questions, Mike, can the respondent repeat the question, please?
The question that I had was, are we planning on starting school at the regular time? And we are. The blended learning, how about older kids getting to classes, to school? And we'll have transportation in the morning and the afternoons. But Paul said that we will use a commons area for students to use, similar to like when you're in college, where you can come in and hang out. And then when you have your class, you go to your class, you come back, and at the end of the day, the bus can take you home. And then another question that I just asked, will academic counselors be available to work with families to support the best student approach for our 10th through 12th graders? And that was just about to be answered.
All right. The short answer is yes, absolutely. We will not let our students run off to the wayside in scheduling. We do a very good job in our average everyday year of helping kids make a personalized learning plan. And in this particular instance, we are going to make ourselves available to do more with that. what that looks like is going to depend a lot upon where the details of the plan and the course offerings go in this blended environment, and who we have teaching at what times, as that will weigh in with every particular student.
Hey, Bob, this is Randy. Just kind of a follow-up on that.
For students whose situation may change at home through the year, so like you work with the student, maybe virtual works for them, and this is for all grades, even if we have kids, you know, in 6th grade coming in, but their home situation changes. Are we gonna have someone that's focused on working with those students? Because the longer this goes, the effects on the economy could be affecting home life. So things could change individually for students as we go through the year. So what plans do we have for that?
Well, you asked, first part of that is you asked who's responsible. That's me. I am the liaison for that particular issue for homelessness and displaced students. What the plan is for that is it's simplistic in its mission, but it's not simplistic when you look at it on paper. It is, you have to find out where they go. First of all, you have to remain in contact and have constant communication with them. You have to offer transportation, even if they are across the state, so they can keep in their regular routine for education. And when that is not feasible or possible, we have to find other options for them and work with them, whichever home district that they would end up in. But they have the right to be in our district as long as possible, as well as if they have additional needs or financial needs and they stay in district. Our goal is building this library of resources, being able to hook them up with those types of things moving forward. It is difficult if you need housing right now because evictions are at an all-time high, but there are monies available that might be able to stabilize them during this time.
Okay, thanks. That sounds like you got it covered.
Thanks, Bob. The next question that I have here, people have found our chat, is what is the plan for the arts, Phi-Ed classes, lunch, and recess?
Okay. Once again, I think our principals would be best to answer those questions. And I know Mr. Bonsack worked with the food service committee, so he's probably best prepared to answer that question as well. So I'm going to turn it over to the 3 principals and Mr. Bonsack to answer that.
So in looking at the food service, there is a philosophical dilemma right now to determine whether or not we want to eat in the cafeteria spaces or if we're going to consume food in the classrooms. And so that is something that we are still trying to work through those details in all of the buildings, because we have to make sure that the spaces are safe in order for them to both be served the food and then consume. And either one provides different challenges in the spaces that are provided. So we do not have an exact answer as to whether or not kids will consume food in the cafeteria areas. That is still a process that we are working through those details on.
And then recess and art classes, I'm assuming recess, will that be at regular times or how will that work?
I can jump in and share a little bit about what we have talked about. Recesses will be in kind of cohorts probably. Fewer kids outside is a good place during this time. So we will look at taking kids out in cohorts. Smaller groups. Our biggest goal is to not cross too many cohorts at a time. So again, that's in the details that we haven't gotten to yet, but we absolutely plan on making some kind of a program for recesses.
Any plans for sports right now? Joey?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Right now, sports are kind of, unfortunately at this point, are up in the air. So we're seeing that we fear the WIA will not provide an overall umbrella for the entire state, as some populations are more affected by the virus than others. Example being urban versus rural, which is making it hard for a one-size-fits-all for athletics and activities at this time. Recently, a regional plan has been discussed and shared with the WIA, and I know Mr. Weber is going to go over that at the end of the meeting here today. And I'll let him share with that later. But right now, we're working very closely with the SWC conference for high school sports and in other nearby schools to collaborate a coordinated plan as we get closer to 3 weeks from today when we start football practices. So please be patient and flexible the best you can as we move forward.
All right. Thank you, Joey. And I think that's going to be the key to all of this is everybody being flexible and understand that things are going to change from day to day as we go through this. Anything that we plan today could possibly change tomorrow or the week before school. Let's see here. What will the class sizes be at the elementary level? Are we looking at 10 to 12 per class?
I'm going to let Mr. Marty answer that question.
Okay.
Mr. Marty, if you're available.
So at the elementary level, those are the guidance that we've been given at this point in time. If you look at 6 foot social distancing, is about 60 square feet per person in a classroom. Given the variety of classroom sizes, square footage sizes at the elementary, that is something that we will have to potentially determine based upon class sizes, overall grade level sizes, as well as classroom sizes. So there's not a definitive answer for that yet, in part because we also still need to survey parents and figure out which students will be coming back into the classroom and which students will be opting for virtual. Those numbers clearly would help us, determine exactly how many students we need to plan for, and therefore how many classrooms to plan for, how many staff members to plan for. So, but again, the guidance is 60 square feet per person within a classroom.
Okay. Thank you, Scott.
Another question I have, is the relaunch plan for the whole academic year or is it by semester?
That's a great question. Right now, we feel that if we commit to this, it needs to be for the first semester. It'd be difficult, I think, do more damage to stop it halfway through if we were allowed to come back and change over. And on top of it, I just personally, I don't see us being out of this in January. Even if a vaccine is found, I don't think it's just going to be, here's the vaccine, go back to school. We're hearing that schools may not be that high on the list as far as receiving vaccines. We don't know that yet. So right now, we're going to take it semester by semester.
Okay. Sorry. Based on that, though, if we know that we're 2 students away from having to change the plan, if it's back in class, and then having to go forward. We're going to plan on being in class. Are we ready to make that change? And then what would be the plan to go back into that?
We understand that we are literally a couple students away from going virtual. So the backup plan is ready. We're ready to go. We've had that experience this spring. All right, we're going to continue to work with staff to give them the training that they need. We got a consistent platform in Google, which is what parents are asking for. So we now have 5 different logins and 5 different systems that they need to navigate with their kids. And so we feel confident with Google Classroom that if we go virtual, that we'll be in good shape.
Okay. Would it be an option for a student to begin the year doing fully remote and then switch back to school at some point, depending on what the parents' circumstances are?
Once again, great question. We've had some initial discussion, but I'm going to be honest, it's not a detail that we've fleshed out yet, but it's something that definitely will be part of policy on whether that would be allowed or not. But I think it would be premature for me to give an answer without having more discussion with the administrative team and teachers about this.
Are there accommodations being discussed for staff of high-risk households?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Mr. Booty Baby jump in on that one.
Yes. The very short answer is yes. Each student or a staff that would need accommodations, we would have to come up with individualized plans for each of them in regards to their access to both their employment and their education. It's our obligation to provide a free and appropriate education to anybody and honor contracts that are written.
Okay, thanks, Bob. And
The last question that I have here right now, how will the schools be cleaned and sanitized each day?
Right. Once again, back to Mr. Spooty, who's on that.
Daily schedules and routines have been time and a half with different chemicals and devices. We've got foggers that are chemically rated to kill this particular disease amongst everything else. We are looking to disinfect with frequency than we previously did. And we are looking to put more hours in when students and staff are not present to be able to provide a disinfected environment. That could come with some residue left over in the morning that we might have to deal with. We don't know fully yet. We haven't tried everything yet, but we are looking with Mr. Adele and myself and the committee are really trying to pin that down so we have an exact, obviously for staffing and other things, but mostly because we want to make sure we can cover it in the time frame that we have allowed each evening.
thank you, Bob.
I'm assuming that we're going to have pumps, hand sanitizers in each room. They'll be all over the building. Okay. You already talked about meals possibly being delivered to homes for those 10th and 12th graders. And I'm assuming Bob's taking care of special education?
Yes.
How are we going to deliver that to the 10th through 12th graders that aren't on site? Will we be bringing those students that need those services on site?
You want me to take that, Paul? Okay, that will depend on the individual student. So if they're not coming for a medically fragile reason, we would have to work out something different. But we are already talking about having individuals that would touch base or even go to the home in protective equipment as far as therapists and evaluations or our specialists, our OTs, our PTs, our speech and language people. We are looking very closely at the guidelines when it comes to those individuals. But the other half of that is with common areas, like Mr. Bonsek talked about earlier, we can bring in smaller cohorts of students to work with their individual needs on where it fits in their.
I think I can add to that, and thanks, Bob, because there are, prior to the school being done, we do have quite a bit of space that we can multi-purpose at the high school level. And so we are going to have to figure out a rotation of when those classrooms can be available to the courses that need them. Priority being to some of our lab-based courses, but we're also going to have the availability that staff can meet with students. And I think it's going to be fairly flexible on that. We just need to work through those details. And I see some fairly large spaces that we could set up almost like grade level student unions, where a large space, a student could come in and work, staff will be available and present and can help work through any questions that they have. But those are all details we just haven't ironed out as a staff, and we're going to begin working on that as soon as we get through this next step right here. And then once October 5th happens and we have that three brand new, very large spaces, we have a ton more flexibility that we can provide to all of our students, but also being cautious because we will have a significant number of students in this one building. And our goal is to keep them in cohorts so that one wing would be per grade level. So we still want to minimize the mixing that goes on because we don't want to have it where students are at a higher risk because they're interacting with more students. But we've at least got a couple blueprints in place of ideas on that.
A question we had, someone joined a little bit late, but the number of hours in the school day are going to be the same as they were beginning of last year. Okay. And we'll be going 5 days a week. Will temps be taken when students and staff arrive each day? And will parents be allowed into the schools?
Okay. We have been talking about not taking temps. Iowa County, we've been in contact with them, and they're more along the lines of giving us guidelines stating that we're going to give parents a checklist of things that they should do in the morning with their children before they come to school. We just don't know if it would be feasible to check everybody's temperature every day with the staff that we have and get school started at a reasonable time. And so what was the second part of that question?
Will parents be allowed into the buildings, or will it be walking to the door?
Yeah, that's a process we still might be working through. I'm going to ask Mr. Smoody if he had any discussion with his group on that.
We've had a large discussion on visitors and parents and those things. Where we haven't formulated the full COVID toolbox, so to speak, for our district, but our initial ask on that is visitors get to a certain point and they stop. We have to make sure that they can only enter the parts of the building that are easy, the office or some other designated area, and then their student will be escorted to them or what will be dropped off and those kinds of things. We have not talked about a disinfecting protocol. If there is a time when the parents coming in for a meeting, we did talk about providing PPE for those parents if we had to be in a non-socially distant situation for a meeting, although we are looking to do most of our meetings virtually.
We're all starting to notice that this is going to take the whole community, not just our staff, our teachers, and our students. It's going to take parents to help out at home in the morning, the afternoon. It's going to take staff to help our cleaning crews. We're going to all become one big happy family in this town, the entire district. And I just hope that we all can all work together as we go through this the next couple months, because we're starting this new like every other district in the state, and everybody is working on the same questions. And I'm hopeful that we can all work together over the next, 6-8 weeks to really get this all worked out. And I'm kind of glad that we're having this discussion early. I know there's a couple other districts doing it tonight also. And the earlier we can work out our questions and concerns, and I like to see that people are still asking us more questions here. We'll get to them. But we all need to work together and help ourselves out, because our most important thing is our kids and our staff, and we want to make sure we're protecting both of those while we have them in the buildings, because if we have a spike, they're all coming back home. So we have to do our best to keep everybody clean, sanitized, and happy over the next 6 months to a year, whatever it ends up being here with the school district.
Speaking of staff, do we feel like we have enough staff to handle this plan? Or should we be planning for extra staff?
Right now, we feel we have enough staff to cover, but we still have to get down to the nitty-gritty numbers, and a lot will determine how many parents decide to send their kids and not send their kids. So really, the next step in this is to, and we have that plan, is to send literally that question
we feel like we
in the
have
next week or
enough
so
staff
thing. Based on the options,
to handle
what
this
option
plan,
would you choose at
or
this
should
point?
we be
That
planning
does
for
not
extra staff
preclude them
or substitutes?
from changing their mind in the next month and calling and saying, listen, we've had a change of plans, we would like to do this or that. So I want to make that clear as well. It's just we need to start someplace, and we need to get that information.
If a student becomes sick or has symptoms during the day, will we have a room where they can be isolated so that we can keep them away from the other students?
I think that goes to Mr. Smoody.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, Bob.
I swear I don't want to talk this much. But yes, we have what we affectionately known as the corral. In each room, we have a designated space and a designated person that's going to be dealing with symptomatic individuals to have the proper PPE, the proper disinfectant, and going through the decision tree of, do they have a fever? Do they have a shallow cough? Making that parent contact as not to interfere as little as possible with the daily routine of a school. And these people are going to know inside and out what the protocols are in dealing with any symptomatic student. But the short answer is, and this is what everybody's going to have to understand, if you meet any of the criteria that say you have to go home, they have to go home. And we're going to have to keep the line on that one if we're going to ensure safety as best we can.
There's a lot of things going on. I think they all have basic elements, but I know Ms. Getsky has done some research on that. She might be able to fill us in a little bit on what she's found out.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I like missed the beginning. Were you talking about the next question perhaps about are there area schools? Is that what it was? Okay. So interestingly enough, many of the area schools, as we found out through our Iowa County Emergency Management meetings, which involved many of the area superintendents and the emergency management team, everybody was kind of waiting for someone to pull out front and make this plan moving forward. And many of the districts are actually at the board level tonight doing their first introduction of the plans. And some of them are actually meeting for the first time with boards, kind of fielding questions. We do know that Mineral Point is doing an alternate day schedule, like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, with Wednesdays off in the middle. Iowa Grant has not made any, they're talking about plans, but haven't done anything yet. Potosi is meeting this week. Sauk Prairie School District is meeting this week with staff. No news out of Lancaster, no news out of Pecatonica. They are planning on going to the board with ideas on July 20th and kind of beating around some ideas that the administrative team has collected from survey data. Fenimore Schools is doing an alternative. They're doing something similar to the plan we've proposed tonight, recognizing that the smaller or the younger students don't necessarily do as well in a virtual environment. So they are planning on in their the 4-year-old up to 3rd grade, having them, or I should say early childhood up through 3rd grade, having them in the building, but they're doing alternative weeks. So Monday, Tuesday, and then a Thursday, Friday with a Wednesday cleaning, but they're alternating the weeks. And then the older students, they're doing a blended version, sometimes on campus, sometimes virtually. Knowing that at any time at all, everybody needs to be prepared to flip into a virtual learning environment should their building get shut down. So is our plan close to what everybody else is doing? Everybody's doing a mix. I like to think that we actually are ahead of the game in talking to many of the districts. They're still out there collecting data from families. Some folks have just recently got a survey back. So we're close. We're in the ballpark with other districts, but nobody seems to have an absolute same plan. And we know Mount Horeb is doing an AB schedule as well.
Another question here. Many frontline workers get tested for COVID routinely. Will we be testing our staff at all? You know, if they have questions, if they feel they have symptoms, are we going to be able to provide that? Or is that something that we can have Nurse Ann provide? Or is that something that we can provide at the clinic here in town?
Right. Well, that's one thing I think that Diana.
I'm sorry, I was muted. What I did say was that that's a topic that I think Diana Klosterman and I need to have a discussion on. We've talked human resources and we sent some information out regarding COVID, but that's not something specific we've had a discussion on. But I was just going to see, Bob, did your groups talk about staff at all and testing?
Two recommendations came out from testing. In regards to staff, they're going to have a similar decision tree than that of students. The non-negotiable, if you're displaying symptoms, you go home. In that regard, as far as the actual COVID test, we would advise against the district doing that themselves. Nurse Ann can be trained, and she probably already is, but I would not recommend that. We would want to forward them either to Upland or through the Iowa County Emergency Services to do that, to guarantee the lab result.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. I think Nurse Ann actually answered one of the questions. Someone asked, Nurse Ann is stretched extremely thin during the normal school year. Will she be getting much needed extra help? And Ann replied, a large part of the plan is training staff in the proper procedure to follow if a child is ill and how the symptomatic person is taken care of. If one building is shut down, will the others follow suit, or will children from the shutdown building be moved to other buildings?
You know, we've actually had that conversation today, and it depends, I guess, is the best way to answer that question. If we can isolate it, and that's why we want to do cohorts, if we can isolate it to a cohort, you know, there's a good possibility that we may not have to shut a building down, just depending. Obviously, Iowa County would give us guidance on that, and we'd be reporting it. But our hope is that a positive case doesn't necessarily shut everything down. It could, though. I mean, it just, I guess, depends.
Typically a cohort, I think I read somewhere it was 30 to 40 students, like a class.
Right.
Okay, just so everybody out there understood what that is. So if a staff member doesn't have enough sick days and they need to stay home because they are sick, or a family member, how are we going to treat that over the course of this year?
That we have guidelines that we're going to follow. That's been set down by the federal government regarding COVID, and I think we sent a document out to the staff. I can't remember all. I mean, there's so many different details. I can't rattle them off right here. Diana probably could, but I suggested they go back, try to find that email. We're going to continue to communicate and resend that information. So if staff is wondering, it's not a one and done. We know that we have to continue to educate staff on what their rights and responsibilities are under COVID. And so Diana and I actually just talked about that again today. And so if you can't find it via your email, get a hold of Diana. She can send some information to you, or we'll be sending something out soon again regarding the regulations.
Did we make any consideration for changing the hours of the day, say 9 to 3, and canceling Wednesdays, so that we have time for cleaning, extra, you know, the deep cleaning that everyone's talking about?
Yeah, we've talked about a lot of things, and it doesn't mean that things still can't be on the table. Like I said, this is a plan that's evolving. You know, we've had some discussions about deep cleans in the middle of the week. We've also had the idea that, you know, we kicked around the idea that we feel that we can get it cleaned well enough in the evenings as well. So I think that's going to probably take a more detailed conversation at the building levels. It's not something we dove that far into at this point.
Once we get all this stuff, we'll have a better idea of what it is that we can do in a time frame over the course of the, say, 4 o'clock till 11 o'clock to get the buildings cleaned up. Some people are spreading the virus asymptomatic. What will happen when someone does test positive? Will the whole class need to quarantine at home for 2 weeks? And will those children's families and siblings from other grades and classes need to quarantine also?
That's a Mr. Smoody question. I mean, I can't say that I could give an accurate answer to that.
And I will give my best, because that changes every day depending on what you hear. If a student tests positive, we have to have tracking on who that student was exposed to. And if we can narrow down who are those students, if they're not displaying symptoms, it's likely they won't need to be tested, but more than likely it's going to evolve into the people who have contact with the known case are going to have to get tested to be moving in.
Thank you, Bob.
And Ann hit it right on the head. We follow the health department on that one.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you saw the question right below that one. Okay. So we got through all of our chats there, which is great. And we're going to let the board members ask some questions now. I would like to remind people, as you heard, it's the Dodgeville School District and Iowa County that are making up the rules right now. We don't have guidance from the state. We get guidance from the state. We don't get told what we have to do. Same from the Fed government. We're creating our own rules here.
And I think that the staff needs to be commended for the time and the effort that they put into this so far. I know that they've had numerous meetings, and it's not hours, it's days worth of time have gone into this. And before coming to the meeting tonight, I wasn't so sure where I was at, but listening to all the planning that's gone on, and it makes me feel more confident about what we've got going on here. I know more people will be looking at what it is that we've got going on, and I think we're a good example right now for Iowa County and Southwest Wisconsin moving forward. I see 2 more questions popped up, but first I'm going to give board members a chance to ask questions if they have any. So anybody here?
Mike, real quick, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But so you know, so that for staff members, if they're wondering, we're going to give them an opportunity to zoom in on a meeting here in the next week or so, in which they'll be able to ask all their questions. We want to make sure they're staying informed as much as we can. And hopefully next week, after the buildings start to meet with one another, you know, and narrow this down, their questions can be more focused. And we certainly hope to have more information by then as well.
Mike, can I just make a comment?
Virtual teaching and
Mike.
I know a lot of this relies on how many parents actually end up choosing to keep their kids at home, but is there a number that we're kicking around at what the threshold would be, 10%, 15, 20%, in which we would have a virtual teacher per 1 or 2 grade levels, and how that would work out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know Brian Brom and myself and the principals have been having that discussion, and you know, it's our best guess right now, speculating on, you know, but if we could get let's say it's 15%, we feel that we may be able to run and depending on the grade, I mean, it's not going to be 15% necessarily at every grade level. You know, there might be a couple at one and more at another, but you know, we feel that maybe we could have a dedicated staff member per grade level, especially like at the elementary and middle schools, that could possibly fill that position and be sort of our virtual educator that's working with students during that time.
Mike.
Any questions?
Mike.
I think I snuck most of mine in. I have one about if we have a student that's out that tests positive, what's the procedure for them to come back? Are we relying on parents, or do we connect to healthcare and providers, or what?
I believe there's strict guidance on that. Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually they got to be symptom-free for up to 10 days or 10 days, and then have to be there's a couple more days involved there too, right? Isn't there, Bob? Up to 14?
Right. They have to also be symptom-free and test negative. And if they don't get the test, they're out 15 days.
Mike? Can you hear me?
Mike Nadler, you have a question? Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, it's not so much a question. I already shot about 25 questions at Paul over the last couple of days, and many of those he's answered in the email that board members got earlier today. And I fully realize and appreciate that this is a work in progress. It's a beginning point, and I as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, while I hope we are not going to have to reinvent the wheel a second and a third and a fourth time, that this is actually the beginning of a plan that we can mostly execute. You know, it's just such a volatile situation in the world with this very, very contagious virus. But all we can do is plead with all the stakeholders involved, the students, for them to be patient and kind, high school kids who might be bitter that they are not going to have the opportunity to be in the building for a while, to be decent about it and understand that we are trying to make accommodations as possible. Parents just to understand that we've made an incredible accommodation to bring young people back into the schools, which then has the ripple effect of providing childcare, which is a major concern in our community. And so that that was kind of one of the major trade-offs in this whole plan, was to bring in the youngest of the children and to provide them with a safe place to be during the day. And so for all the stakeholders, we just have to be patient and understanding, and also to realize that week by week, as I said a week ago, this plan wasn't even uttered about at our committee meeting. And so we just have to be very patient and understand that the admin team is doing very hard work trying to come up with a plan that will work. And while other districts are doing something different, alternate days, which puts tremendous burden on childcare, making childcare sometimes almost impossible to accomplish. You know, we are rolling the dice in a different way, and I am fully supportive of the process, knowing, of course, that the team will do its best to be accommodating and reactive to all the fluidity of this situation. And so I'm fully appreciative of all the questions that are being asked and the concerns of parents, children, teachers, et cetera, in the community. We're taking our version of a risk with the plan, and it's as good as any of the other ones out there. Let's just be honest. There's no special formula that's going to create the best type of plan possible. If there were, you know, we would all be following it. And so until some larger body, the governor should regain his powers to actually do something decisive, the WIAA decides to put on its big boy pants and do something decisive, et cetera. We are all making decisions on a local level, and that's just risky. And so I compliment the staff for really working through it, knowing that we have many more stages to go in this process. So thank you to everyone who's been working on it.
Well spoken, Mike.
Yeah, I agree.
Like Neil Armstrong said, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. There was a question about AP. Are we still going to allow AP credit? Will students be able to take AP classes?
Mr. Bonsack?
At this point, I believe that the answer is yes. I still believe that the staff are going to be able to teach their courses and get right back into, we are in the stage of educating, not just maintaining like we were in term 4. The term 4 emergency planning is over. We are now back into educating, and we're excited that we've got a lot of opportunities. And Paul and I met with some students today, and they want to be back in the school to some capacity. And that's what I know right now, we can get the high school students, all of them, at least in the school 1 day a week if they would like. I believe we could possibly get up to 3, but you know, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I want to go slow. I want to keep us all in school. And then as we start to get more spaces available and the staff can wrap their minds around where we're at, I think Paul said it best here today. We have an anchoring point versus a ton of ideas. Now we have as an admin team and as a community need to meet and figure out, okay, what is it that Dodgeville's going to do? And that's what the next couple of weeks are going to entail. So long answer, but short answer would be yes. I believe we can still do AP courses.
Thanks, Brian. I believe Tom McGraw is on the line and might have a question. Is he out there somewhere? I didn't see him on the list anywhere. I don't know. He's muted.
If I could just say, I'll say one other thing. I'll say one other thing. Put your darn masks on and wear them. Don't be all,
Correct.
Don't go cowboy on us in this community, please.
Yeah, it will take some easy small steps. It's just a matter of everybody working together to get it done. Transportation, what does busing look like for students?
Sure. That's going to be...
Sally, if you're out there, I'm going to turn that one to you.
Thank you so much. we have been working with Lamers really, really closely. And so we are following all those same guidelines as everyone else and looking at the buses as what can we do to reasonably socially distance and still have buses that have more than 17 kids on them. So there's a whole bunch of guidelines out there. We are working on what those routes will look like once we have a decision about what the model looks like. And again, I hate to say it, the number of kids that we have to transport, that's a huge thing to know right now. We'll be able to decide on what the routes look like, what in-town busing will look like. We're looking at all of that right now. And we meet again this Thursday to talk because we knew this vote was tonight. And so we'll go from there. We are in the process of checking with, after our survey, looking at families and saying whether or not they are going to use buses. We had great results from our survey saying that there are parents in this community. Mike Knabler, you'll be very happy to hear this, lots and lots of parents who are more than willing to help us out and transport their children if that helps us get all of our kids to school. So more to come.
Yep. I think that's the theme that we're going to have here. There's always more to come. Discussion's going to continue. Keep asking questions. Make sure to send them in to either Paul or one of the principals, because then all the communication gets to the at least a few of the key people that are on the committees. Do you have anything else to say about your general relaunch plan, Paul?
And once again, I just want to thank everybody who's worked on this plan and all the staff in general. You know, this has been as tough a time for them as anybody. And, you know, knowing that as we go forward, I think what's exciting about this is we have an opportunity to reinvent education in Dodgeville, to make it uniquely Dodgeville. And I think as much as COVID has caused us to lose connection with some of our past traditions, it's also allowing us to break away from some of those things that have held us back. And so I think in some respects, this is an exciting time that we have this opportunity to make the changes that sometimes we just wouldn't have made because it was too comfortable where we are at. And so I'm looking forward to working with the entire community in moving this forward. And we want to make sure that we're doing our best in communicating with all of the stakeholders so that they feel that, you know, they have a seat at the table. So thank you.
Relaunch plan for the 2021 school year. So moved by Randall, and second?
Second.
By Jessica, and a roll call, please.
Humke,
Yes.
Bloom, absent. McGraw, still absent. Knadler,
Your mic is turned off, Mike. Yep.
did you say yes?
Yeah, I think you gave a thumbs up.
Okay. Schrader, yes. Wazorek,
Yes.
Thompson.
With my appreciation for the thought and effort that went into this, yes.
Okay.
Motion carries.
So once again, I want to say thank you to everybody that's put their time and talent into this. I know it's going to change, but with all of us working together, I think we're going to get a good thing coming out of this. And like Paul said, this can really change education in Dodgeville. And we might be leading the way around the state actually tonight. So thank you everybody for joining in. We had 108 to 110 people through most of that conversation. So thank you all for joining in. Next is consideration of resignations, retirements, and hiring of district personnel. Paul?
So can't hear.
All right. And so first of all, you got to get your superintendent to unmute himself. So first of all, we have a resignation, Carrie DeClercq as a special education teacher.
I'll take a motion on Carrie DeClercq's resignation. Motion by Jessica, second by Randall, and roll call, please.
Okay. Humke,
Yes, with thanks.
Bloom, absent. McGraw, absent. Knadler,
Yes. Yes.
Wazorek,
Yes.
Schrader, yes. Thompson,
Yes.
motion carries.
I'm going to have 2 hires.
Yeah, 2 hires tonight. Ainsley Anderson, middle school history. Do you take them separately or do you take them both? Okay. And Jason Holzmer, elementary special education teacher.
Motion to approve both of those hires.
So we have a motion from Jessica and a second by Randall. Okay. And a roll call, please.
Humke,
Yes.
Bloom, absent. McGraw, absent. Knadler,
I will say yes.
Schrader, yes. Wazorek,
Yes, and welcome to the staff.
Randall. Motion carries.
Ainsley and Jason to the Dodgeville School District.
And I don't know, maybe Jason's out there tonight. Mr. Spooty said that he might be in the audience. So Jason, if you're out there.
Ainsley is also.
Oh, Ainsley is too. So maybe both of you would like to introduce yourselves.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be joining the staff. Thank you.
Nice to see you again, Ainsley.
Welcome, Ainsley.
And Jason, are you out there?
I am. Thank you so much. Feel very welcoming with the participation. It's exciting to see so many people being a part of a school board meeting. So I'm looking forward to being a part of the Dodgeville School District. Thank you very much.
Welcome, Jason.
Welcome.
Great. Okay. Is that it for hires then, Paul?
That's it for hires.
Okay. So next is extracurricular contracts approval.
For discussion tonight. And I was given some thought to this one over the weekend, and it kind of hit me that where I wanted to know where these listings were located, if they were in the teacher contract or if they were separate contracts. So we were looking at possibly to protect us against COVID, if the sports seasons would be shut down, that we would look at prorating pay up to the point where the shutdown occurred. And I just wanted to make sure that, that we weren't getting ourselves legally into a bind if we did this. So I just had a conversation with Diana and the school attorney today. And at this point, I would say we need to consider holding off on this until we get some things done. We wanted to add a disclaimer, like I said, that if the season is cut short, that the coaches' pay would be prorated accordingly. But right now, staff coaches have their assignments listed as part of their teaching contract. And so the contract was signed June 15th, so we could no longer insert that language for this year because the contract isn't signed. And that we could make the changes with support staff coaches and non-staff coaches. We haven't issued the contracts yet. But if you want to make that change, we would need to do so prior to the beginning of football practice starting in coaching. And if any of or all the sports seasons were canceled this year, it would lead to a situation where some coaches were paid and some may not be paid. It's something we need to consider. And I shared a sample of a letter of assignment that was sent to me by the attorney, and that maybe we should consider offering separate letters of assignments to coaches, which allows us to put that language in case the season was canceled, that we would have the right to prorate the salary based on the number of days or however we would want to determine that.
Because we haven't really worried about not paying coaches previously, like in the spring sports, we paid all coaches. So I was curious.
Right, well, that was, I wanted to bring that up in case so the board had the discussion on what they would want to do with sports. Would they want to continue to pay coaches like they did in the spring? Or at this point, would you want to say, you know, there's been enough, you know, that was kind of more of an emergency situation. We felt that the seasons would resume a month later or whatever your reasoning was for paying the coaches at that time. And if you want to continue to do that, I mean, obviously that's up to you, but you just wanted to lay that out. If you would want to go down the road of prorating salary, if the season was to be shut down, that we have these issues in front of us.
I mean, I know coaches spend more than just those
Absolutely.
2 months or 3 months coaching.
And that's
so
where an issue where prorating becomes an issue, you know, I mean, so there's other options you could look at about saying guaranteeing a certain portion of it, plus a proration. I mean, there's other things we can do. It's just, and you could just say, no, we're going to pay them for the fall and for the winter if that would happen. And then we would deal with this come around next spring at a full season. So I just wanted to give you your options. You could go ahead and vote on them tonight as is, and we move forward. But I did want to make you aware that that is how the contract works right now. So we may want to consider
new language.
Yeah, doing a letter of assignment.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that was just my thoughts.
We can discuss it. I mean, what do you all think?
Well, I think if we're going to do a prorate, we would need to know what that was, whether there was something. I mean, we'd need more discussion about.
Yeah, you kind of need some numbers to know what's going on with it.
Sure.
So maybe this is something that actually needs to go back to curriculum and co-curricular.
Curriculum, co-curricular, and they can discuss it. But is there a time frame? Because we need to do this before August 1st, correct?
For fall, if you wanted to do something for fall, we'd have to have something, because otherwise you're going to have that inequity, you know, and you're going to have coaches starting.
Yeah. So do you foresee us having another meeting to discuss planning for the school year?
I haven't thought about it. I mean, certainly that's a distinct possibility.
July.
Yeah, I could put, would you want it scheduled as a curriculum meeting?
I think so. I think that's the group that needs to really discuss it more thoroughly.
Okay.
Have that conversation with Joey and maybe, you know, a couple coaches come in and the board members that are part of curricular, co-curricular, really kind of hash that through.
But Mike.
Mike wants to talk.
Mike's talking.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Mike, even if we have a special curricular, co-curricular meeting to discuss this and maybe some other issues, given the deadline of the end of July, there would still have to be a special full board meeting to vote if we were going to do something different.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, do we want to do a full board meeting and also take care of those other details that we had tonight? You know, we had the Fund 46 and we could put those all into one meeting.
I think that'd be the best thing to do.
We could do the second reading on the policy that night too. Yeah. So would the last Monday of the month?
It's okay for me. It's okay for me.
Okay. 7 p.m. or do you want to go earlier?
I think 7 o'clock is good for everybody.
Okay.
So are we saying 7 p.m. on the last Monday of the month?
7 o'clock or 5? I thought we talked about a full board meeting. Well, the curriculum has to be meeting first.
Right, we would have to have a meeting first to go through that.
Yeah.
So we'd have to have a meeting first and then reconvene as a full board.
Unless we just all talk about it all, I'm fine with that too.
You could just bring the whole
You can
board
just do
in.
the whole board to do it all.
It can just be a special meeting.
Just a special meeting.
Special meeting.
Just have a special board meeting.
Yeah.
Then we have everybody who wants to be here right away. Stop laughing, Ryan Bonzak.
For punishment, he has to come.
Okay.
So we're tabling 5.3.
5.3 we're going to table for now until 2 weeks from now. Approval of short-term borrowing for cash flow purposes.
Okay. You know, Lois and I spoke about this topic earlier today. It was one of the topics that came up at the finance meeting the other night. She has numbers regarding fund balance that may give you a better picture of where we are at regarding short-term borrowing, and I think she shared those with you earlier. And so I don't know if you need any more information regarding that, because that question was somewhat answered earlier in the meeting.
Okay. I will take a motion on short-term borrowing for cash flow.
So moved.
Moved by Carrie, second.
Second.
By Jessica, and a roll call, please.
Mike.
Yes.
Bloom, absent. McGraw, absent. Knadler.
I will say yes.
Wazorek.
Yes.
Schrader, yes. Thompson.
Yes.
Okay. 5.5, approval of academic standards.
And that is going to get turned over to Jackie.
All right, I'm going to do a screen share really quickly. I made some updates to the academic standards notice that was attached at the curricular meeting last week. So I'm just going to do a quick share if that's okay. Is that a yes? All right, here we go. Can you see now? And Paul actually had paper copies for the board. So at this time of year, the board is asked to approve the use of what we use district-wide for academic standards to provide the essential learnings for all the classes that we offer on the core curriculum that we use at the elementary level. So at this time, what you'll see in front of you is a familiar document to some of you. It identifies the academic standards that we utilize in order to provide the foundation for our work with learners. There are a few changes, and you'll see some years attached to some of these standard areas because they've been recently updated by the Department of Public Instruction. Some things that you'll also see is that there's been some items added so that we use a couple of different reference points when we're taking a look at our essential learnings. The first update is under art and design education, and those standards were actually released last year. So we had been working on our standards in art and using these brand new standards that had been released to make sure we are covering the standards that the state has put up. So art and education is the first change that you would see. The next item is English language arts. The change that you'll see there is that ACT career and college ready standards for reading and English language arts is actually in that spot as well, because we use that information at the high school level to help us with those essential learnings. The next place where you'll see an addition is under mathematics. Again, it's the same kind of thing that you'll see in the ELA standards, the ACT career and college ready standard for mathematics. The mathematics department at the high school uses the ACT standards to help them to do some crosswalks between the Common Core and the ACT career and college ready standards in order to identify essential learning. The next area you'll see a combo is school counseling. Oh, yep, school counseling that we follow. There's two different models there, and we do some, again, another crosswalk between these two models to identify essential learnings in the counseling area. Directly below is science. Added to this is the Wisconsin Standards for Science and Implementation Resources, and this correlates with the next gen standards, which our science department, our core people have used to identify the essential learnings, but they also have the correlation between the Wisconsin ones and the next gen standards. Social studies, our team of social studies folks in the middle school especially, and the high school have been taking a look at the Wisconsin Standards for Social Studies. Notice that this was put out in 2018. We just started doing professional development in the last year and a half, particularly at the middle level, and did quite a bit of professional development with the middle school team as they attend a number of CISA professional development training to help them identify the essential learnings within that social studies standards group. Under technology and engineering, you'll see following the ISTE, tech ed information there within the technology group. And we have a lot of those plans actually integrated within K-12 curriculum plans. And then the last one on that list has to do with world languages. And in 2019, these were released at the state level. And our Department of World Language, which is primarily Spanish, uses these standards as the foundational work for their essential learning. The rest of the document is a series of links that allows you to do more exploration in your free time to take a look at the standards. And that's what the rest of the document is actually meant to be. So this particular document needs board approval, and it sits out on our website where parents and families can connect to see what standards we're using to identify our essential learnings in our classroom. What questions might you have about our academic standards notice, if any?
Jackie, a lot of updates in this, just to the standards adopted.
You cut out right at the beginning.
So when you were reporting out, just, we've always had subject areas, but all we did this year was update all of our standards.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, I will take a motion in a second on academic standards.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Carrie,
Second.
second by Randall, and a roll call.
Humke.
Yes.
Bloom, absent. McGraw, absent. Knadler.
I'm going to assume he said yes.
Is he waving, jumping up and down? All right, Wazorek.
Yes.
Schrader, yes.
Yes.
Thompson.
Sorry, yes.
There's the yes.
All right, and then Jackie, I assume you're going to be talking about the educational options also?
I am. I was telling Paul tonight, this is a really interesting document in light of the conversations that we've been having in the subcommittee and at the admin table and with the board, of course, and now with the community in regards to educational options. So this particular document, again, is provided to families. It's located on our website, and if parents request it, we make it available. And its job is to explain to families and learners what are the options for you if you're attending the Dodgeville School District. So it really outlines, I can attend the public school of Dodgeville. I have some opportunities at all of the buildings. Obviously, the high school has more of those virtual options right now. As we head into this next school year, there'll be more virtual options for all kids, obviously. But these are specific programs that we currently use at the high school. I would tell you that it's very possible that this document will appear back on the agenda in August if we need to update the offerings at the middle and elementary level. So I hope that you will think about that document appearing in front of you again, because there might be different options going forward as we drill down at the building level and identify maybe some virtual needs or different resource needs for children and families. So at the high school, serving 9th through 12th grade, there are 4 options besides conventional learning. They are listed there. I would tell you that pass packets are something that are very rarely used at the high school, but because they occasionally are utilized for student learning, we leave them on the list as a possible option. At the Dodgeville Middle School, we look at conventional learning, and Dodgeville Elementary School, conventional learning again. The document then goes through different options that you would have aside from being essentially in a brick and mortar space. So there is a private school currently in our district that's registered with the Department of Public Instruction. That is St. Joe's School. So that is an educational option for our families as a private school. We don't have any private schools in Iowa County, or excuse me, in the Dodgeville School District, but there is a charter school in Highland that families could choose to attend. The virtual schools are listed here. We do not have a virtual school in the Dodgeville School District at this time, but then there are different options that are listed for families on this particular document. There are active links where a family, if they chose to pursue that, they could actually do an active link off of this document. Full-time enrollment, full-time open enrollment. We want our families to be full-time enrolled with us, but in case they choose to open and roll out, there is a link here because that is something that a parent could choose. Number 6 talks about something that we've talked about in the last year, actually, because the state made some changes to this, and that is the Early College Credit Program and the Start College Now program. So the Early Credit Program has to do with attending the UW system or a college, and the Start College Now program refers to the technical college enrollment that students can do. There are other course options through Apex and the Virtual Academy that are alternative options as well for students. The Wisconsin Virtual School run by CISA 9 is an option for our families to choose for their learners. And of course, families can choose to attend a homeschool environment, but also there's, and this has happened in the last few years, as you know, there is a part-time enrollment option. And this document gives families some information about how do I go about enrolling in a part-time option at our school district. And there's some guidelines provided to them there. Number 7 talks about if you are a parent of a child who has a disability, there is a special needs voucher program that you could be eligible for through school choice. And these links will provide a brochure and then some other information about applying for a private school choice program if you are a family with a child who has a disability. Number 8 talks about, again, the homeschool private education programs. And then if you are a part-time enrollee, that you have to follow certain guidelines in order to be eligible for participating. And then for information, you can call Paul or me.
And I'll pass it on to Jackie.
So with that, I need board approval on this one as well. Unless you have questions.
Yeah, I just have one, Jackie. On the Dodgeville Middle School, they serve 51st through 8th grades.
Oh.
Can we change that to 5?
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic.
That's a lot of
I still would be in grades. I'd still be in middle school.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's the same information that we've had each year. It's just updated each year with anything that comes out new in our area.
Mm-hmm.
So appreciate the work you put into that.
Yeah, and you might see it again in August as we update other learnings for middle and elementary.
Right, yeah. Okay, thanks, Jackie. Anyone else have any other questions? All right, I will take a motion on education options.
So moved.
Moved by Carrie, second by?
Second.
By Randall, and a roll call, please.
Humke.
Yes.
Bloom, absent. McGraw, absent. Knadler.
Yes.
Schrader, yes. Wazorek?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes. Okay. One final thing on our agenda. We are not talking about Fund 46 tonight, but we are talking about a CISA 3 letter from the superintendents of the region.
Yeah, so I sent you a copy of that.
Green button.
I sent you a copy of that. This came out of our weekly meetings that we have Zoom meetings with CISA 3 administrators. And the letter was actually originally created by Rob Wagner, the superintendent at Lancaster. He was going to send it on his own, but Jamie Nutter suggested that we all look into getting our boards to back it. And then we would sign off on it as well as an administrative team. And it's kind of based on the belief that fall sports has a high likelihood of being canceled. We suspended, and it could be suspended sometime between August and October. A team with one positive player must have the entire team quarantined for up to 2 weeks, and then must go through the return to play protocol, which is another week. So there's some thought. I mean, you could literally lose 3 weeks of your season, and if that player tests positive after a recent game, both teams must quarantine and go through the same protocol. And so there's some concern that players could lose a full season and not be able to get that season back again. And so the suggestion is to take the fall sports season, move it to the spring, not start the winter sports season until practices in December, start the season in early January, and then move the spring season to the summer. And it will go from, say, June 1st to the end of July. And so what they're asking is to see if boards would discuss it and possibly back that proposal. And then if that would be the case, then I would mark off on a little spreadsheet that's going around, and then I would sign my name to the letter as well. So that's kind of what it was all about. And so I'll just open it up to the board if they have any questions or want to have some discussion about it. I think it's a good recommendation. I think there's some wisdom in what is being said here, because we'd hate to start a season and then lose it and not get it back. And I think there's a greater potential that we may be able to play in the spring than now. The way things are going, we're going to come off the summer, and there's going to be a lot of kids who potential exposures over the summer, and it could be coming back to school. So from that standpoint, I mean, it's always a crapshoot with these things, but I think there's some wisdom in the proposal.
And I think what it does is it allows WIA to look at another idea, because I'm on the WIA board and we've been sent 100 different ways to go about running sports this year. And this is one that we haven't seen. I don't know, the letter from Lancaster has already been sent to WIA already last week. So, any other questions or any other comments?
I guess a question would be, if it didn't go through or WIA didn't support that, do we have a plan for how we would handle fall sports? And I guess maybe more so the games that would be held and how far out we might go from, would we do a full conference or smaller?
That's been some of the discussion. I don't think there's any definite plans. I think the ADs have to probably get more involved with this as well. And maybe some of the coaches. There was some discussion about, do we then just run our own regional schedule with teams, and it might be a modified schedule as well, but nothing definitive. Just talk at this time.
To that?
Yeah, this plan from the superintendents hasn't been shared out to. Many ADs do not know about this plan yet. I did some digging today pretty hard to, see what everybody else thought, which created 2 meetings, one tomorrow and one on Wednesday for me. But yeah, I think the downside to this, we would likely lose the WIA tournament series unless they supported it, and that becomes statewide, which I see that being very difficult, as I explained earlier with urban versus rural. It's very hard to have that one size fits all. And, if we did this model and they didn't support it, we would not have a tournament series. We could do, like Mike said, in, more of a regional type thing. I think Paul said it, regional type tournament series in our small group. I think there's 31 schools in the CISA 3. So we would have to division out that to make a tournament series. Scheduling events, it would likely be shortened seasons, obviously, for the winter. Football depends on how many weeks we can get in with cold weather at the start, whenever we decided that. There's a lot of questions that go into it right now, but the positives are we don't start the fall seasons and then cancel it. and then there's no fall. That's the positive of this plan, is it gives some hope to not cancel an entire season or a partial where we're canceling games and not being able to play due to being quarantined for 3 weeks. So this is a major athletic issue that we're definitely trying to solve.
Okay, thanks, Joey.
You bet.
Any other?
I just would make the comment that it could be detrimental to the fall sports, but having the early practices in August and starting the fall sports and then having that impact the beginning of the school year because you have cases in the sports could impact even going to school at all right away. So you have to think about, you know, all the non-athletic kids too making that decision.
I think there are a lot of pluses to this, but also depending on who goes along with it. Yeah, there could be some minuses to it.
Do we have any sense of that, Paul?
Yeah, I can tell you, I got the, right now, from CSER 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 of them signed to it. Yeah, 31.
That would be reacted to.
I'm going to abstain tonight. Because I'll be discussing the WIA.
Yeah.
But I think it all, like I said, it offers an option.
Yeah.
That I think more people might be looking at, depending on what the numbers do here as we roll through July and August.
I guess I would be more comfortable supporting that plan and postponing it, giving the kids the option to have a full season, albeit later, and also in the bigger picture, giving the greater possibility of a full start in September.
But signing on to this letter really doesn't do anything.
It just says that we support the concept.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
No, you don't have to.
You know, if the WAA says, you know, we're not going with the plan, it doesn't keep us from still participating in the WIA tournament or running a regular season in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll take a motion on that letter.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Jess, second by Rand. And a roll call, please.
Humke.
Abstain.
Bloom, absent. McGraw, absent. Knadler.
I would vote yes, but also to affirm Jeff Bradley's comment, this is a tough night to be a high school student.
Mm-hmm.
So yes.
That was a yes.
Schrader, yes. Wazorek,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Okay. That passes, so we will forward that information on to CISA 3 and the
Yeah, there's a spreadsheet. All
Spreadsheet.
I have to do is click that our board approved it, and then I'll sign it, and then I'll go in with the name.
Yeah. From what I read in the letter, is there a plan for a tournament series in that at the end of each of the sporting seasons?
In the region?
With everything shifted in the region, would we have some kind of tournament series? What are the thoughts of the superintendents?
So I'm not.
This model in WIA adopted it. What are the thoughts in this group? How would they model the tournaments?
I didn't hear any discussion on that.
See, I didn't read any of that either, so I was curious. And I saw there was a question here also. I don't know if we've looked forward to this yet, but what does busing look like going to football games if we travel to football? Usually the team is packed on like sardines on one bus with what, 50
You have to take
kids?
multiple buses. Joey, maybe you can jump in and help with a little of that. I'm sure you've got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was on the transportation committee, and I know I've told Sally this as well. I don't know if she's still on here. Athletics wise, planning for a normal return to sports come 3 weeks from today. I was really hoping we'd have some answers, Sally, from what athletics could look like. So, knowing too that changes were likely for athletics coming this fall in some fashion. Truthfully, just waiting to see what our transportation committee came out of, what information came out of that.
Okay, thanks, Joey.
So I don't know.
Yeah. And I would concur. Mr. Bradley put on here, it's a tough night to be a high school student, and it's true. We're trying to do these things for the good of the whole community. These kids are kind of getting caught up in it. I'm hoping that we can still make it special somehow or another for the year for them, similar to what we did for the seniors this year. But this year it's going to affect everybody. Not that it didn't last year, but we're going into the year knowing what we're going into. And I'm hoping that we can get the backing of the community and people can help us out. As we approach September 1, I'm doing my best to stay home. I'm wearing masks when I go out, shopping and things like that. And it's those little things I think that will help us in the long run get this plan to work out, along with the time and energy that staff, teachers have put into it. And there's a comment on our chat that focus must be on academics, postpone, limit all other activities. There are kids that really do enjoy sports, and it is a big part of the high school environment, is those other activities. You don't just have sports. We have DECA, FCCLA, the plays, musicals, dances. School is all of those things wrapped up in one big package, and if you start leaving parts of it out, I think you're missing a big piece of what school's about. I know we're going to do our best to do some of those things. We talked about sports a little bit here tonight, but we have to do what we can to provide well-rounded students when they step out the door, and giving them those options I think are very important. So with that, I don't have anything else to offer. Do any other board members have anything? Do you have any reminders or announcements, Paul?
Nothing right now, except that we'll have the board meeting on the 27th, and I'll have Kim make up the agenda and get that posted.
So I want to thank everybody for joining on tonight, and everybody take care, stay well. And if you want to join us,
we'll see you at the end of July. Thank you very much.
Big thank you to everybody for being here.